Get your popcorn at Bartley and Giants. Less calories and take your seat. Silence your phones.
There are dinosaurs in Jurassic Park. Oh no, they just escaped. The power went out, setting them all free. Run for your lives.
I got big.
He's got cool cars and gadgets, loves brunettes and blondes. Your husband loves these movies. He loves brunettes and blondes.
Brosnan and Daniel Craig, Connery and Roger Moore, and those two other guys you've never heard of before.
Bond. James Bond.
Da-da, da-da, da-da-da-da.
Found him in our backyard, was left by his spaceship. E.T. the tiny alien just wants to phone home. Kate Winslet was cheating with DiCaprio. An iceberg caused the ship to sink, but that string quartet kept cool and played on as most everyone drowned.
Prison Ford,
Indiana, not the school. He was a cowboy with a science background. He was searching for a club while fighting pirates and bad guys and running from boulders in a cave.
Life is a box of chocolates, he said, and he really had to pee. When not on the run, he sat on that bench, waiting to see Jenny. They had a child, that kid from The Sixth Sense, dead people he could see. Bruce Willis dead the whole time, what a great movie.
have you seen this movie? Our guest would be known, but this famous theme song you probably know. We'll show you how this song is used in movies and shows. The characters always in a race, running in slow-mo. Stallone was a nobody until he wrote this great story. The underdog wins in the end, always yelling, Adrian! Rocky 1 through Rocky 5, they kept the montage alive. Running up the stairs, push-ups and punching cows to train. Oh,
Like Bizarre Wars, too many prequels can't follow along. Vader, more like a hater, used his lightsaber to injure his son. Now Luke, we're grateful that you saved everyone. But why did you kiss your sister? We know She looked hot in that gold bikini. But come on, man, she's still family. Family. Everybody. Star Wars. Yada-da, Star Wars. Yada-da, Star Wars. Yada-da-da.
Hope you enjoy RSNC movie medley. You should have known.
Hello, welcome to the Inside Pitch. I'm Christopher Lockhart, the creator and administrator of this private Facebook group where screenwriters, creatives, filmmakers meet to ask and answer questions and exchange ideas and information on the craft and business of movie making. I do not administrate the group alone. Steve Enlow is very helpful, as is Ramesh Santanam. And in fact, Ramesh happens to be my co-host for these events. And here he is.
Hey, Chris.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. We're actually seeing each other for the first time because we weren't in the green room together. So,
yes, I know.
Hello. We
Sorry,
are. That's okay. It's okay. We are, by the way, we are doing a simulcast this morning. We are going out live to our Facebook group, but also to our YouTube channel. This is the first time that we've ever done it. And it's working because I can see, which is amazing. I think there's like maybe one person, we only have I think 5 people who actually subscribe to our YouTube channel. But at any rate, hello for those of you who are watching on YouTube. Thank you. And of course, to all of our group members. And by the way, if you are watching on YouTube and you have a Facebook account, you are more than welcome to join us. Just search for the Inside Pitch on Facebook and join the group. It'll ask you, how did you learn about the group? Tell them through our YouTube channel. And you're in. We have a very, very low bar. And you, Ramesh, you're doing well? You're still here in LA?
I'm still in LA. Yeah, I'm doing well. I just was a little busy this morning, but yeah, I'm doing very well.
Good. You were just in my neck of the woods earlier this week for a meeting?
Yes, I did. Yes, I was.
At the Mayborn?
Yes, I was.
Very nice.
Very nice place.
Yeah,
very nice place.
Very nice.
And we actually sat in that little public park you mentioned.
I told you, yeah. That's the hotel where Justin Bieber stays when he.
Oh, I didn't see him.
Oh, no. I don't know if he was there, but that's.
That's I saw a few others, but not him.
Right. All right. So listen, let's get going. Again, thank you everybody for tuning in. And, we do these live events in our Facebook group every now and then. We try to do maybe one a month. And of course, this one falls right on the heels of the logline workshop that we did.
Right.
We don't post those to the YouTube channel. They usually just stay in-house on the Facebook page. But it was about 3 hours and 15 minutes of giving feedback to our members,
Yes.
loglines, yes. And so now today we have with us James Doc Mason. I'm going to call him Doc.
Right.
And you may do the same thing, Ramesh. And he's written a book. He's written an entire book. I mean, I wrote an article about loglines.
Yeah, yours was what, 56 pages, 58
he wrote
pages?
a book about loglines, which I didn't think was possible. And in fact, when he reached out to me and asked me to write the foreword, I was like, oh my God, like a book about loglines. Really? I mean, like, what could he possibly have to say? But again, he takes the approach that a logline is really a window into your story, and that it's an X-ray. It is an X-ray of your screenplay, and so the book really goes into details that about protagonists and antagonists, and he has certain terminology. He even takes my article to task. So I'm ready to fight a little bit.
Is this going to be a rumble?
It might be. It might be the first logline rumble in Hollywood history. So, do you have an intro for him?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm just tagging someone who cannot see link for some reason. You might want to refresh your page too.
Oh, something I should have. I was supposed to put this up at the top of the page. Also, send them to YouTube.
Yeah, someone said she does. She is seeing it on YouTube too.
Okay, good.
Then,
yeah, let me just put this. I'm sorry. We just this is just low budget. I'm going to pin this to the featured, so now it'll be at the top of the page. I forgot to do that. I'm just so excited because finally, somebody else is going to talk about loglines. I can just sit back. So
exactly.
Okay, go ahead, Ramesh.
So okay, wait. Is that it? No, I can't find this one person who's trying to find. I don't know if she's a member or not. Okay. But she's watching on YouTube.
All right, good.
Okay. So let me see if I can find his. It's been a slow morning. Okay, here we go.
See that, Ramesh?
James Doc Mason is the father of four, a career ad exec, screenwriter, producer, and consultant. He's the co-writer of the 2021 feature thriller Caged. He co-wrote Ye Blind Samurai Woman, which just won Japanese Film Festival for Best Action. He also wrote the feature drama Journey to Now, which is currently in pre-production. He is the author of Mastering the Logline, How to Excite Hollywood in a Single Sentence, with a foreword by you, Chris Lockhart, story editor at WME. The book is available in print, on ebook on Amazon, or at masteringthelogline.com. James, welcome.
Thank you very much. And there will be no rumble, I promise.
Oh, come on.
Let me tell you that in the logline group that I run on Facebook, my co-administrator, James Patrick Joyce, who hopefully joins us today, he, let me put it gently, he's I play good cop, he plays bad cop. And the first thing out of his mouth is, have you read Christopher Lockhart's article? This is something we demand of our, because really it's, for us, it's it's a shorthand for, we want to help people tell the story that they want to tell. But if they don't understand the purpose of a logline, well, as you guys understand.
Yes. All right. So why did you write, why write a book about loglines? What was your inspiration? And what did it take?
So I've been an administrator on the logline group for, I don't know, maybe a decade. And I started to write a book several years ago about collaboration. And I have this idea that collaboration is like a 3-step process. You need to understand, you need to get on the same page. And so my chapter 3 was on log lines, which I think I know fairly well. And it just kept getting longer and longer and longer. And I realized that that needed to be the first book. So this is the first book in understanding how to collaborate. And really, for me, it's about getting on the same page and telling the story that you want to tell. And you always talk about conflict, Chris. And what I realize is that a lot of people don't understand what conflict is. And so I really wanted to break it down into its core elements that take a first principles approach. And so I also wanted to have something else. I wanted to have something different to say about log lines from James Patrick Joyce. So I kind of developed this kind of process of breaking down what conflict is in a narrative conflict in a story, and then like reconstructing the log line from those elements. Because if you don't have those elements of conflict, you're not going to have a log line. It's just that simple. As you know,
you're not going to have a screenplay either.
Right. Yeah, because those elements are the same in both. Right. The main character and the opposition. And so one of the things that you talked about was the net. Oh, let me start again. The necessary. It's so incredibly necessary to convey to the reader what it is that's in the story. So you're not trying to entice the reader with the potential for conflict, but the specifics of conflict. And so this is something I learned from you and from your article and over the years. And I just felt the need to really break that down.
Right. And you do, your book is very sort of methodical and you have a very specific kind of system. You take a specific film and then you break down the major dramatic elements of it. And then you take that and you formulate a log line from it. And so, I think it's a great way to sort of help people look at story, from a very kind of systematic point of view. And then, of course, hopefully at some point, all that just comes naturally, and they can just sort of look at the movie and then they can just put the log line together very, very quickly. And we are going to today, we're going to take some of your log lines and we're going to run them by James and he's going to offer his feedback. So you may drop your log lines into the comment section and then we'll pull some out. Again, we're not going to be able to get to all of them like we did the last time, just a few.
Yeah,
and
people
James,
are already posting them.
Okay, good. And James is new at doing, sort of all this and promoting his book, and so we're gonna cut him a little slack. Maybe we won't stick you with some of the dilly log lines that we'll just bypass those. All right, Ramesh. It's like sometimes I feel like really the best way to talk about log lines really is to just look at log lines and okay, this isn't working, this isn't working, this isn't working, this does work, etc. Which is why I want to use some real examples. I don't know if I can do it from
I logged
look, something I see that the chat on YouTube is the same chat here. Okay. So, which is good.
Are there log lines on YouTube? I'm not watching on YouTube.
My guess is that it will go right into this chat log that we have here.
Right. But there are, I see a bunch here in our chat already.
Yeah. Okay, good. All right. It's very exciting. All the 21st century technology. So
have you heard of the fax machine? No.
Right, exactly. All right. So let's talk about the word struggles, okay? Because you know that that's a word that I like and that I use it. And I often, like, even on the Inside Pitch page, there's always a lot of pushback, right? It's oh, that word's overused, and I don't think it's overused. I think honestly, the only person who overuses it is me.
There's one person who said never ever use it.
Yeah, right, exactly.
I've used it all the time, and
right.
I've never got pushback.
So and we're talking about here a way to suggest the conflict that the main character has to grapple with through the story. So what is your take on that word and alternatives to that word?
Well, there's this wonderful book. It's called A Thesaurus. And so struggle is a great word. I love that because you're absolutely right. It defines conflict, because if there's no conflict, there's no struggle. But you could use must, right, or other words that are that require the main character to act. I'm not seeing anybody. Oh, there we are. Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to give you the.
Sometimes I'm going to give you the
spotlight every now.
I'm learning. Right.
Yeah.
I'm learning.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
You can feel free to ramble on and on, because the less talking I do, the happier that I am.
Okay.
Plus, I can drink my smoothie.
Sure. Avatar cup. Oh, yes. By the way, I have to say, I love the weight room music. That song is the best.
Yeah. I'm going to have to cut it out, of course, because I don't have the rights to use it. But I just thought it was kind of cute. I just stumbled upon it this week. That was all a cappella. So
that's great.
Yeah.
Maybe you can give us a link to it, and we can.
I wish I could even think what they're called, what the name of the group is, but I will. So talk a little bit about, because you have a very sort of specific way you look at protagonist, antagonist. These are some words that you don't necessarily agree with, or words that you want to expand upon.
Yes.
To sort of dive in deeper. So why don't you sort of explain your theory to us? I'm going to give you the stage.
Okay, wonderful.
All right.
So for me, when you say protagonist, it conjures up this idea of a change character who has to change in the end, or has to recognize an internal flaw. They have to have a external, achievable, trackable goal. They have to have all of these things that are very specific. And therefore, if you have a character in your story that doesn't match those elements, isn't a change character, doesn't have a goal, then it seems to, if you're using that kind of a template for your loglines, your story is going to fail. So really what I decided was that it's not a wrong thing to do to have a character who is reactive to a villain. I mean, almost all heroes, I can't think of a hero that isn't reactive to a villain, although probably it's technically possible. But so you have the villain who initiates the action, and the main character, the character who has the primary POV, the one has the desired, the goal and the stakes. They're the main character. The villain isn't the main character, even though they initiate the action. So it occurred to me that I should describe those kinds of main characters in a way that you can feel like the story that you have is legitimate, right? But if the main character does have a goal but doesn't have consequences, that's a different kind of thing than a protagonist. I thought, well, you need to break that out. That's a kind of what I call a resistor character, the character who resists change but doesn't have consequences for not acting until the end. And then I thought, well, there's the opposite of that, which is the character who is already changed, right? And they need to convince someone through the course of the story that their perspective is correct. And if they don't convince somebody, then we have a tragedy. So, and then I realized that you have these kind of observer characters, these kind of characters who just kind of watch everything that's going on. Like, for instance, in Shawshank Redemption or any story with a narrator, the narrator is going to be an observer, may not be a main character, may very well be, but that's a different thing. All these differentiations for the main character, it really depends on how they interact with the other elements of story. And so if you're going to have a character who is passive, that's perfectly okay, and you can have that in a story, but you need to describe the central conflict in a way that that justifies their inaction, if that makes sense. And so therefore, if you have all of these different types of main characters, then you should also have different types of opposition. We're not just going to have the antagonist. Now, I kind of purposefully narrow the definition of an antagonist as the one who opposes the protagonist, right? They don't have necessarily an external goal themselves. They don't have, they may be motivated or may not be, right? They could be, you could very well agree with the antagonist, but they still oppose the protagonist. The villain and the hero dynamic, that's pretty obvious. And then there's also the monster, which you can't reason with the monster. So that has a different dynamic in a logline than a protagonist or a hero. And then of course we have the forces of nature and supernatural and technology and culture. And so those things are oppositional forces that can be represented in the logline, but not in the same way as a villain or a monster or an antagonist.
All right, so can you be specific about that? Can you, for example, can you give us an example of maybe how a monster kind of antagonist impacts the logline differently than the way maybe like Hans Gruber from Die Hard would?
Sure. So, you think about any slasher movie where the characters just have to survive. They have to endure. And maybe maybe not. Maybe it's thematic, the reasons that they are that the monster focuses on them. Or maybe it's, like a haunted house. The specter is just, their space has been invaded and they're rejecting, right? So it really has to do with identifying the central conflict in those stories, and then working your way backwards to, is the central conflict between, a like Hans Gruber, who is a very motivated villain, or is it, let's just say, Jason, those initiate certain actions, right? But, in one, the hero has to bring justice to, not just to his ex-wife, but to justice in the form of, these guys are doing something illegal. He has to correct that, but that's not his primary motivation. Justice is not. Saving his ex-wife is really the primary. So that's what makes this so great, is that you have a hero and a protagonist in the same. So we could argue all day long about whether he's a hero or protagonist, but it doesn't really matter as long as we understand the central conflict, which is, saving his isn't it estranged wife?
It's estranged, estranged, I think. So technically, yeah.
So yeah, he's trying to essentially trying to save his marriage, and he loves his wife, right? So the idea that I would argue that he's a protagonist because he has that goal, and the justice is just a layer on top of that. In order to achieve his goal, he has to achieve justice. And so that's where my focus would be in the logline is like in order to save his estranged wife, he has to thwart this this endeavor.
Right.
And in a movie where there's a slasher, it's, you know, more important about the setting, right? The setting is important because we have to isolate our characters in order for them to not be able to escape. So the idea would be to establish the setting and what they have to do to endure. What does enduring mean, right? Getting through the night, making it to out of town or whatever that might be. That is exactly what they have to do, right? Their desired outcome is unique to that story, but it works within the genre, right? So we have this genre that kind of gives us a template for how the slasher movies should work. The isolated, victims get picked off one by one. We're willing to accept that those generalities, but we need specifics of setting and character, and maybe even a little bit of theme, right? And it may not fit in the log line. Maybe it does.
Or it can be inferred at least. That's what I always say. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you look at a lot of log lines, obviously, in your Facebook group. And what's your Facebook group called?
Log lines.
Log lines. Okay. And what do you think is the weakest element? Do you find that there is? I find that most log lines, have a very particular weak spot. Is that your experience or?
Absolutely. And it comes down to your article, honestly. It comes down to the conflict isn't clear. The conflict may be hinted at, it may be, walked around, it may be implied. And I think the understanding of the purpose of the log line as is something that is to get the potential industry professional to actually pick up the script and, crack open the book or the script and, read the actual words on the page, right? That's the only purpose. It's not a marketing tool. It could be used that way, but it really,
well, it is a marketing tool, in some sense, if you're putting your log line into a query letter, right?
Yes, sure. But that is, the product isn't the script. The product is you, right? So you're selling yourself. And so, I think marketing people tend to fall more towards premise than they do towards, or I should say the premise is the promise of conflict. Now, we've heard the promise of conflict in, Save the Cat, but I look at it as a slightly different thing. And that is that the promise of conflict is the concept without the specifics of the character or plot. And we just kind of, the light bulb goes off, like, oh, that sounds interesting. Tell me more, right? And then the log line will say more, right? But there's the other expression that we're all familiar with, which is the same but different, right? And that's what everybody's looking for, because nobody wants to risk their career over a movie. So they're looking for something that has worked. They're looking for it to be expressed in a different way. And so the log line is that promise too, the same but different, right? So we understand genre and premise and logline; those three things work together to set audience expectations, and in different levels of specificity. So
now, did I hear Ramesh say that you have a marketing background?
I have worked in advertising for 25 years now.
Okay, and so is there a relationship between
Absolutely.
the log line? Yeah.
So the idea of copywriting, which is actually, I have my degree is in copywriting. I don't do that anymore, but the idea of copywriting is to be as brief as possible, and to get your point across. Now, the audience in a commercial is, anybody who's watching the commercial, and it doesn't have to be as effective as a story in one viewing. It can, the repetition has something to do with the message, but brief is the key, right?
Right.
So in order to get your message across, you have to really understand what the message is you're trying to convey. And a lot of commercials don't do that. And that blows my mind, right? It's like, okay.
Right. And neither do log lines, right? A lot of log
right.
lines don't get the message across.
Right. And that's
Most
why
don't.
So now my job in advertising is to break down the process of getting a commercial on air. I work with different parts of different agencies. Like right now, the advertising world is kind of fragmented. It used to be, Mad Men, where everybody did, an agency did everything. And now we have agencies. We have creative agencies that just create commercials. We have strategy, marketing, planning, buying, it goes on and on. Everything's fragmented. And then those companies themselves are owned by a conglomerate. Like, so for instance, I work for a company called PhD, which is owned by a company called Omnicon, not Omicron. So anyway, the Omnicom has tens of thousands of employees, and PhD has thousands and thousands of employees, and nobody's ever heard of us because who's going to hear of the guy who does the strategy, planning, and buying, right? But my job is to kind of make sure that the process happens when it's supposed to happen. So I help to set the timelines for what it takes to get a commercial on air. So I have to know the entire process. I don't have to be an expert, and I don't have to do the work. I just have to know when it has to be done, right? And so that kind of process management kind of led me to developing a process for writing the logline, which is breaking down each element so that we understand how those elements work together. And then and we do this with what I call literal language, which is the language which we speak, right? There's no there may be figurative language, but right now we're just talking off the cuff. But if we were to kind of say what it is we want to say, make sure it is what we want to say, and then we can find a way to say it in as briefly as possible. And so that's why I feel like the world I live in advertising and the world I live in with describing movies are like so similar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was why I asked, because I could kind of get that. I could get that sense. Do you have a copy of the book there? Can you hold it up? Let people see what it looks like. There it is. And where can they get it?
It can be, right now it's available on Amazon, and it's available on softcover and on ebook. And I'm working on getting it into a hardcover so that I can get it into some like institutional places. I'd like to get it into libraries. I'd love for it to be actually taught like at a community college or something. Can you imagine if young writers, this was the first thing that they learned instead of Save the Cat? Save the Cat, by the way, I have to say, is a really good book if you're just learning. If you're learning how to shape a story, they give you one way. And unfortunately, they kind of say that's the way, and it's not. It's just one of many ways. And the problem is that so many people have used that one way that it's so completely obvious that it kind of makes me cringe when I read a script that follows Save the Cat to a T. I'm like, this is formula. This is like, there's no surprise.
I'll be honest, I've never read Save the Cat, at least from beginning to end. I certainly know some of the terminology.
Right.
We've had people like Jamie Nash on, and Naomi Beatty, who are both sort of save the cat experts.
Mhm.
And yeah, I know that a lot of people, really sort of love that. But yeah, I
It's easy to
think,
teach.
yeah. Oh, I guess so, maybe. But yeah, I think like Eric Bork's book, The Idea, and we had Eric Bork on, and then, your book, could be two very good companions, Eric Bork's book first, and then, the logline, coming up with the idea to get the idea right, and then the logline. So let's talk about the logline, because, Eve Hayes, who's got the screenwriting South Africa. I'm having a senior moment. I'm sorry, Eve, if you're watching. She hosts the Screenwriting Safari Facebook group. And, I had the pleasure of going 1 year only. She's never invited me back again. Just kidding, Eve.
What did you do?
Is she here today? I hope so.
Something, honestly, she caught me with a baboon. And that was it. Yeah. And that was it. But so she had recently asked the question on her group, log lines before you write the script or after you write the script. And it was 50-50, about 50% of the people said, I write it afterward, and about 50% of the people said that they write it first. Now, clearly everybody has their own process, and I would never want to say that there's a right way to do things or a wrong way, but I certainly have an opinion on it, as I'm sure you do, Doc. So what is your opinion?
So let's look at the logline as a diagnostic tool. And if something's not working in the logline, it's certainly, well, I wouldn't say certainly, it's most likely not working in the script. And
agreed.
So then, therefore, if you can write a good logline for a script that hasn't been written, then you have guardrails. It's that simple. You have guardrails that will lead you down. Now, I would take it a step further and say a logline can be an outline, part of your outlining toolbook or tool. It is a great tool for going through the ideation process, right? You come up with a concept, it's a kick-ass process concept, but will it work as a story? And you can, without having to invest 3 months into a first draft or however long it takes you to write a first draft, you can very easily in a few, depending on how fast you write, you can do it in a few hours or a few minutes. You can say, this is not going to work because of this and because of that. And if you understand the elements of story, then you can very easily, move your story forward or reject a story outright, simply through the logline. And if you write the logline, then you can expand upon that, right? The logline is just the central conflict. Then if you write, if you have a kick-ass premise to start with, let's be frank, a logline's maybe the second step in creating a great script. The first step being, Eric, like you said, oh my gosh, Eric Bork's book, right? Great idea. Is it a story? Yes. Okay, we've got a logline. Is it going to be the logline that you have at the end of the script? Maybe, maybe not. Right. Maybe it's just a 1 hour version of your first draft, right? You spend hours instead of weeks or months doing a first draft, right? Because you've eliminated so many possibilities. And really, if you think about a story as like a slab of marble and you want to create David out of that, David is in there. You just got to find him, right? And so if you have this idea of what David looks like in the first place, then, you're not putting wings on him.
Right.
Bizarre.
Yeah. Look, there are writers who don't like to outline. They would rather just sort of get in there and see where the character takes them, and I'm okay with all that. Again,
right, that's a first draft.
It's your journey, fine. Right? But really, I think that when we look at log lines and they're missing so much. and the screenplay's already been written. And I'm just like, wow. Like, you know.
I should say a screenplay isn't just 100 pages or whatever of stuff that happens. It's not just plot, or it's not just emotion. It's about how you move the audience, right? And if it doesn't move the audience because it doesn't have the elements of story in one way or another, and I'm not saying that it has to be one way or another. It's not a prescriptive thing, right? Writing a story. What you have to do is you have to keep the audience in mind always. And you have to say, this is my idea, and this is how I'm conveying it to the audience so that they understand my idea. They're going to come up with their own interpretation of it. That's because they have a different perspective. But if you don't have that in the first place, forget about it.
Right. And it's just a great way to kind of bat the idea around a little bit. You know, it's is there a protagonist? Is there a central conflict? Is there some kind of oppositional force there? Is that central conflict enough to sustain 100 pages? Is it specific? Is it vague?
Yeah.
I mean, look,
it's setting. What's the flaw? All these wonderful things, right?
It's possible that the reason that log lines are often so bad, and maybe the reason why screenplays don't work, is because, especially new writers, maybe they don't really know what to look for. Maybe they don't understand what a central conflict within a screenplay entails.
Sure.
What that means. Specific versus vague. Is there enough heft, enough buoyancy to keep an audience engaged?
Meaning.
I mean, look at the number of our members who struggle when you ask them, what does your protagonist do in the story? They're just like, they come up with like, well, it's a mixture of Eastern and Western cultures. And no.
Yeah.
Sure.
Right. Because you're just like, it's like, I read a log line and really, I just want to see the movie. That's all. I just want to be able to see the movie. And if those elements aren't there, they're not strong enough, or they're misplaced or misshaped, then I think that the log line fails. And again, in Doc's book, he really does sort of break things down. Doc, why don't you just hold up one of the pages, where you've actually have like a breakdown of something. And, so, the audience can just kind of get a feeling. I'm going to give you I mean, I don't really know if anybody's going to be able to see it or not, but.
Okay. So, I'm seeing if I can get that on camera. So you'll see that I break down in what I'm calling literal language, the context and setting, and the opposition, the main character, and the trigger, which we haven't talked about, which is a really interesting subject all on its own, and then stakes and consequences, and then forget about length. That just is that has all of these things the log line will have in common with the story. And so here's the exploration of a call of the wild. And in the examples in the book, I always list the writer, give them the respect, because this is a book about writing. It's not a book about directing. So once we understand the elements of story, right, in literal language, then we can break it down and figure out how to come up with the log line. There's about 45 of these in the book. So Call of the Wild, Dog of the Yukon is the actual name of the book, right? So, and so the log line I came up with, and we can argue about details, but this is what I came up with. A family dog kidnapped from California and sold to prospectors in the Yukon gold rush experiences the brutality and viciousness of humans and animals alike before being rescued by a kind human who lets him explore his wild nature. Now, I like that. I mean, I see the movie. I've seen so many versions of Call of the Wild that play with these elements a little bit, but they're going back to the original novel and going to almost every single movie. It's the logline here describes what we see. It describes the movie.
Right. Do you want to talk a little bit about Trigger, since you seem
Sure.
to get excited about it?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
So so almost all of the great screenwriting coaches and masters have a different way of calling it. Some call it the inciting incident, some call it the inciting event. And I thought, it's not really an incident. It's not really an event. It's a series of events. And each one of these are events that change the status quo of the main character in some significant way. And whether they're aware of it or not. But the story doesn't start. That's not the start of the story. That's the necessary context for the story that's about to be told. And the story starts when the character becomes aware of those triggering events and they realize they must act. That's the must. They must form a goal. They must struggle. They must endure. All of these things come from the triggering events that cause an awareness in the main character. So one of the ways that you know that you have a main character is that they have the epiphany. Bing! The inciting epiphany. And we can look at the inciting epiphany and it points to the conflict, the central conflict that is resolved in the climax. So we're starting to shape our story, right? So we have, should I start here? And the idea is we have to understand why this is important to the main character, why the inciting epiphany, why these triggering events are important to the main character. And if we can understand that, then we are willing to go on the ride through the second act and up to the climax with this character, because we want them to have their desired outcome. We want them to reach their goal. And we certainly don't want them to have to experience their negative consequences if they fail, if they don't achieve their desired outcome. So all of that comes back to what's necessary to tell the story that you want to tell. The story starts with the triggering events and moves forward with the desired outcome, the negative consequences, climax. But let's talk about the triggering event can be described as an event or a series of events, right? So like if you look at Star Wars, I think is the best example, because we have so many different things happening throughout the story, that happen prior to the start of the actual story for Luke Skywalker. And all of those triggering events can't be described in a logline. They have to be described sort of like what we call project verbs, right? This kind of idea of, he goes to work, right? It doesn't describe him, stepping out of the house, opening the car door, getting in the car, driving and down it skips all of that stuff and just describes it as he's going to work. I hope I'm explaining that well enough. So like in Star Wars, we want to describe the triggering events. It's like it can be something simple like he's thrust into an intergalactic war. I mean, that's just off the top of my head, right? It could be, a different writer will have a different way of describing the series of triggering events that lead to the epiphany. And the epiphany in Star Wars, and we're talking about the first one, episode 4, which is when Luke comes back with Obi-Wan and discovers that Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru have been murdered. And his life will never be the same. It's a very meaningful inciting epiphany. And it thrusts us into the story. It makes it personal to Luke, and from then on, you know, we have this. How is he going to resolve this? Star Wars is such an interesting. It uses the hero's journey so well, and therefore it was copied so often. So.
All right, thank you. So using James' book, Doc's book, Doc Mason's book. Hold it up again. Come on, what kind of advertising? Let's go. There you go. There it is. There's the name. And forward by. Look at that. And by the way, everybody, just so you know, I get $1 for every book that's sold. So I
wish I got $1.
I'm just kidding. I don't get anything. But look, let's support. Doc is a member of TIP, and he also has his own logline group. And so support him. Get out there, get the book, and then let's hear your thoughts on it. We can have a discussion about the book on the group page, and Doc can even chime in and sort of clear things up, or kind of add to the discussion. It could be fun. We don't do that very often, so might as well start. I think really, again, the best way for us to understand the way Doc looks at log lines is to just see how he looks at log lines. And so, Ramesh, have you been monitoring?
Yeah, there's one question here I'm going to post. This is from Byron, friend Byron, who won the nickel.
Again, hello, everybody. YouTube.
I think if I hit show, it shows up, right?
Yeah, exactly.
There we go.
I love survival stories. Have trouble writing the sentence about them and making it seem interesting. That's an interesting comment. Right. Okay.
Right. So the way I approach those is being really specific with the setting and what the character needs to endure. If there's a thematic element, if the only reason they have to endure is to survive, that's kind of boring. There's always something greater than the death of the character. I think that if the only thing is, we had this discussion before, if the only stakes, the only negative consequences is that the character dies, then as far as I'm concerned, the story ends, right? The character died. There's nothing else to worry about. We need something more. We need some theme. We need we need the consequences to happen to go beyond the death of the character, for the most part. So survival stories is often about why they have to survive, right? And I love The Gray. Are you familiar with The Gray, the Liam Neeson?
Sure.
Yeah, that one is a survival story that is completely upends the genre, I think, in a beautiful way. It's so thematic and so brilliantly written, as far as I'm concerned, that I wish I had the log line for it right now. I don't, but it really is an internal journey as well as the external journey. And although one may be a tragedy, the other one doesn't have to be at all. The other one could be triumphant, right? And we still feel satisfied with the ending of The Gray. At least I did. I love the ending of The Gray. And from a narrative standpoint, did he die? Or, I mean, we never see it. So like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, that freeze frame ending just allows us to live with that hope, right? So for the survival story, I would say just find the reason why the character has to survive, why they're there in the first place, and be specific with with the oppositional force or forces, because you can have the oppositional force of nature and culture at the same time. It's not a one or the other.
And there's different kinds of survival stories, right? You know, like the Poseidon Adventure is one kind of survival story. You could have a slasher movie is really, you know, a survivor story. And then you could have a character piece where the struggle to survive is more internal. You know, there isn't anybody chasing them, perhaps. And we could say that in some ways, Ordinary People is a survival story. Because, you know, he is really sort of faced with perhaps taking his own life. He tried it once. And so, you know, we understand that that's what's at stake. You know, he has a dear friend who sort of about halfway through, or no, maybe actually, I think it's at the end of the second act where he learns that she has taken her life. And, you know, and so it's kind of all around him. And
I would say that's a resistor character. And the resistor character doesn't have necessarily the consequences immediately. They kind of build and build and build and see how long the main character can endure these internal emotions before they, you know, kill themselves or find some solace, so to speak.
Right. And of course, a lot of that conflict is explored externally, right, between the relationship with his mom, because that's what he has to endure if he is going to survive. He has to figure that out.
Right.
And it's pretty hard when, you know, you're a teenager and you're in the house with the person who gave you life, and you know, they're in a sense your greatest enemy in some ways.
Narratively speaking, yes.
Right. So, you know, so there's all different kinds of survival stories. And
if the word is endure, then I think you've got a survival story.
There's another question here.
Sure. Thank you, Ramesh. For beginners such as me, there is always the fear to give too much clues about the story through a logline. So much can be guessed or perceived through words. Where is the good balance? Right. So they're afraid that they're giving away too much.
Well, so first of all, they're not. They're describing the central conflict. They're not describing the outcome of the central conflict. So that needs to be clear, because this is not about enticing the reader through mystery. This is about being specific about the conflict itself. And you can't copyright an idea, right? So you really need to be very clear with how your story is different from every other ideation, every other version of this story. And readers will have read many, many versions of a story. So what makes yours different? And that is the specificity of your conflict. So you're not giving clues about the entire story. You're not talking about, you know, the theme, and you're not talking about the escalations, the roadblocks. You know, you're talking about
the ending, you know, right. You know, like the logline isn't going to tell us that Bruce Willis is dead.
No.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
You know, I always say that pretty much a logline is really summarizing your first act, because pretty much you are introducing your main character, the central conflict, and the antagonistic force. For the most part, and I'd say 99.9% of scripts, all of that's done within the first act. There are some exceptions. I always bring up The Sixth Sense as an exception, because it's really, that really sort of goes until about midpoint. But that's it, you know. And so it's really all that a logline is offering up is basically the setup. It's really just the setup
up through the triggering event, because the inciting incident is important to understand. That's the start of the story, and the climax of the story is the central conflict. So if you have those two things, you have what you need. But you don't need the inciting epiphany, by the way. I should be very clear, because the inciting epiphany is assumed because we're reading a logline for a story that happens. We have to assume that they are aware of the conflict.
Right. And that's a good point, which is that, sometimes loglines really they try to fill in blanks that sometimes don't need to be filled in.
Right away.
Yeah.
Let the script do that.
Right. Let the script do that. Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
Here's another question.
Okay. In the real world, what is the purpose of a logline? Who is it written for?
It's written for Christopher.
It is for me.
And I mean that in a very genuine way. I use the term industry professional, and it doesn't necessarily mean the story editor at William Morris Endeavor. It means anybody who, and everybody's getting a free hat, right?
Everybody's getting a free hat today, yes.
So,
and a visit with the baboon.
Okay. Good callback. Eh? So, oh my gosh. The baboon got me off track.
I'm so bad. All right. You were talking about
the industry professional.
Correct.
So the industry professional is anybody who you want to read your script, not who, your mom might read your script. That, she's going to read it, because you're her, wonderful child. But if you need like someone to give you a recommendation, or if you want to, do well in a script contest or whatever, you need the reader to want to read the script. And I think that the logline is the main purpose of the logline is to get the industry professional to want to read the script.
Yes.
Get them to crack open the pages and read the script.
And also just to educate people about the script. So, for example, at the agency, there are hundreds of emails that go out a day talking about certain kinds of projects. Maybe it's a screenplay. Maybe it's a project that is in development. Maybe it's a completed film. But all of these emails, all of them have loglines, because it is a way to familiarize people who are not familiar with the project. So this
gets
way,
everyone on the same page.
It gets everybody on the same page. We all sort of understand, oh, okay, yeah, that's the script about this character who has to do this before this happens. So it really is sort of the starting point for education and communication. I mean, loglines are used everywhere. The idea that when anybody who says, that loglines aren't used, I don't know what business they're in, but, I've been in this business for 35 years, 25 years at the agencies, and loglines are everywhere. I mean, that was the reason that I wrote my article to begin with, was because when I went in for the first time, I couldn't believe how much loglines were utilized and how they were everywhere. And I was like, wow, this is something that I think, I need to start telling people. So,
if we can all just all agree on what a logline is.
and something, it's like, and sometimes people will just kind of write their own logline. Like, for example, sometimes we'll get a logline here where I'll say, well, this isn't really a logline, it's just a concept, but the concept's really good.
Exactly.
And so, right. And so kind of based on that, I'm in.
Right. So in my next book I'm writing, I talk about the premise line. And the premise line is essentially the concept without the specifics of character or plot.
Right.
And it's really, as a marketing tool, it's really, really powerful. And I also think that, for people who are interested in writing log lines for TV, they have a problem. The problem is that, they've written an episode, they've written a pilot, and now they want to write a log line that kind of encompasses both the pilot and the series. Well, that just doesn't work. But if you talk about a premise line, like a premise line and a log line, so the premise line is like the concept of the entire series. And I know I'm making that term up, but I think it's a really beautiful, complement to the log line, is that if you think about the premise line as the promise of conflict and the log line as the specifics of conflict, then putting them together, you have, in 2 sentences, you have everything you need to market a movie or market a TV show. And so I'm hoping that I can convince the world to use premise line as well as log line.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
No, Ramesh, please.
No, I was saying, I mean, every single script I get from producers and execs for coverage, the very first thing on the coverage sheet is the log line that I give them.
Yeah, absolutely. It's right at the top of every single report.
It's log line, and then you get into the synopsis and everything else. But log line's right at the top.
Right.
I like this idea of premise and log line. I refer to it just as concept and log line, right? So it's like if you were to look at Liar Liar, the concept
That's in my book.
Is
that's exact.
Right. Well, because it's a very strong concept, right? Which is that you have this pathological lying attorney who is forced to tell the truth for 24 hours. That's the concept. And like I always say, like, that's great, and that would be a hilarious Saturday Night Live sketch.
Right. Well, let's rumble for just a second.
Okay, rumble.
I think a concept is even shorter than that. It's the idea you get when you're in the shower and you're like, oh, what if a lawyer couldn't lie? Right? The what if. And then what you described to me is like the perfect premise line. It's like expands that into the potential for conflict. Right.
But it doesn't have the element about him having to win a case.
Right.
Because that's really what propels the story.
Right. And reconnecting with his son at the end by being his genuine self doesn't necessarily have to be in any of those things. It's just a beautiful part of that story, which elevates
that's the heart and soul. It's like, I'll bet if you ask the writers, and one of whom is a member of the Inside Pitch, actually, Paul, that I would bet that was a lot of what got them through it, which was that love story between the father and the son.
Exactly. Oh my God. And it's such a beautiful story.
Right. But the dramatic engine of the story is most certainly, his having to win this lawsuit without his toolbox, which is his ability.
With nothing but the truth.
Right. With nothing but the truth. So, all right. So we'll be looking forward to that book. But in the meantime, you can get Mastering the Logline on Amazon.
Here's another question.
Is the log line the only way that someone may be interested? What if your pitch is stronger than your log line?
Well, your pitch is only as strong as your log line. As if you can't describe your story in a single sentence, then your pitch is going to fall flat too. Because the worst thing you can do is to go into a pitch and talk for half an hour and not explain your story. Just like Ramesh was saying, at the top of every query letter or industry communication is going to be the log line. So I look at it as there's 4 different ways that a reader will decide to read your script. And I call them the 4 promises.
Just one quick thing before you continue on that. She said, my problem is I have pitched this script and everyone loves the premise, but I cannot get the log line down. So with that.
Okay. So. Yes, Tasha, I remember you from the, I would suggest that if you read the book, it might take you, a couple weeks to read the book, but it'll be an advanced class and you'll be able to break down all of the elements of your story so that you can pitch the premise on one level. And on the second level, you can say, these are the elements that I need to describe the central conflict and only the central conflict. And it may feel incomplete to you, Tasha, because you're the writer and you've written so many wonderful words about so many other things. But really what the audience, the industry professionals looking for is the central conflict. And so if you're giving them only what they want, they're going to be much more motivated to read the actual script.
And you were saying the 4 things. I'm sorry, I interrupted.
So the four promises. The first 2 are recommendation and reputation, and those are 2 things that I don't think that newer writers or even many established writers, unfortunately, don't have the ability to affect. If you're Tarantino, you're going to get your script read. If you're Steven Zalian, everybody's going to want to read your script, regardless of whether they want to make the movie or not. They want to read it, and that's because you have a brilliant reputation. The recommendation, it could be that you won Nickel Fellowship, and now people want to read your script because you have because the Nickel has recommended you in a way, or some other like if you're the agent or manager recommends your script, somebody, if it's a well-respected agent or manager, you're going to get your script read. However, if you're just a guy who doesn't have, or a gal, if you're a person who has written a script who doesn't have anybody to recommend you, then you need to have the other 2 promises in spades. You need to have a kick-ass premise and a kick-ass logline. So premise, logline, recommendation, and reputation. Those are the 4 promises. Those are the 4 things that you may need 1 or more of those things in order to get your script read. And so we're only talking about, one little part of this, how to get your script to the top of the pile. You're competing with thousands of other scripts.
Hundreds of thousands.
Hundreds of thousands. And so that's an interesting question, Chris. How do you prioritize what you read as a reader for William Morris Endeavor?
Well, I prioritize actually sort of based on offers. So which projects are coming in with offers first and foremost, and then of course from whom. Are they coming from Spielberg? Are they coming from the studio? Mm-hmm. And it sort of, kind of then works its way down that way.
Here's another question.
And if the logline sucks and you have to read it, it's probably done at the end of the night as opposed to the beginning of the night.
Well, unfortunately, sometimes it's like, listen, like we need this read in an hour, or, and then I'm like,
Sure.
But this is the reason why I feel so confident when, I say things like the logline really reflects the screenplay, because I have read tens of thousands of loglines followed by the screenplays. So, I have a very, very large sampling, and to a point where, I feel like it's empirical that if a log line is not working, I can look at that log line and I can say, I know exactly what's wrong with the script, And then I read the script. And I'm right. And I'm right 99.99999% of the time. Right. Maybe on occasion there's a log line that reads a little flat, but it has the elements to tell a story, but they're not very interesting. And then I get into the script and I'm wowed by the voice or the choices that the writers made that didn't reflect in the log line. But those are far and few between, that they are truly the rare exceptions. And so, so it's like, I'm just not like talking out of my ass when I say this.
Sure.
Right? I really truly believe that if a log line doesn't work, the screenplay also doesn't work.
Like you said something brilliant, I think, in the foreword. Yeah. And that is, you said it's a diagnostic tool. And it, for me, it absolutely 100% is. If you understand the elements of the log line, then you understand story.
Right. And of course, if you understand story, then you should be able to understand the elements of a log line as well.
Right.
It really should go both ways.
Yeah, absolutely. I believe it does. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just want to kind of look back a little bit on, you said something about earlier about the log line representing the first act.
Yeah.
And I want to kind of make that a little bit more clear.
Okay.
And that is that it absolutely represents the first act in context and in terms of triggering events, in terms of goal, in terms of the initial consequences, whether it's the consequences for inaction or the negative consequences for not achieving your goal. But what it doesn't do is, it's not just the first act. It kind of illuminates the third act, the climax. It just, what the logline doesn't do is go through the second act,
the details.
Yeah, because that's all not necessary.
Right.
But it's essentially the first act and a peek forward, because all of the elements point to a climax, a potential climax.
Right.
Also the third act.
Right. I mean, that's why I like the word struggles, because struggles for me encompasses an overarching endurance, sort of something that carries us through the second act and to the climax.
Right.
So to me, that's what that word infers, that when somebody hears that, the sheriff has to struggle to kill a shark, we understand that it's not going to happen in one page, that we get the idea that that struggle is going to carry us through the entire story. That's another reason why I like that word, because it does indeed take us into, he's very good. Yes. Ding, ding, ding. I was wondering what you were doing, I thought maybe, it was like Rocky or something. So at any rate, yeah. So that's the reason that I like the word struggles, and it's and it's also a strong verb, I think. But again, it does indeed infer second act and third act as well.
Right.
Ramesh, how about we toss up some log lines, folks? Okay. Just remember that StreamYard uses they seem to have a limited amount of space, a certain amount of characters. So
so I'm just
if it's too long, your log line will be cut off and we can't use it. So remember, anyway, log lines are supposed to be short. I mean, I see one right here. Can I just throw it up, or do you want to go in some kind of order? I don't want to.
No, I'm just randomly just gonna pick log lines for the.
All right, I see one here, so I'm just going to throw this one up, and then because it's just staring at me. This is from Mary. Hi, Mary. All right, log line. With the planet's soil mysteriously crumbling around them, the last emperor of a family dynasty uses his deceased father's journal to prove his worthiness as an emperor, while his exiled grandmother resurfaces to warn him off the throne.
That is a mouthful. So the question is, what's the central conflict? Is it that the world is crumbling? Is it that you call them this person the last emperor? How do we know it's the last emperor? Is that because the world is ending? So I guess the first thing I'll start with is I don't really understand what the big picture central conflict, what is resolved in the climax. And then if we can go back to that, then if we can understand that he's got to prove his worthiness, then we can go back to the character description. Is he's not the last emperor if unless he fails. And so what must he do to prove his worthiness? You know, how does that relate to the soil mysteriously crumbling around them? Which I kind of like that context. It gives me a visual anchor in which to see a story, but I'm just not seeing the story yet.
Yeah, because I think you just hit the nail right on the head, which is that there is a lack of cause and effect here, which is that the world is crumbling around him, and he's using his father's journal to prove his worthiness. No, he needs to be using his father's journal to save the world from crumbling around them. Otherwise, why even mention it?
Yeah. Can you give me just 1 minute? I have a special
course.
guest that's coming
Yes.
in. I have to go let them in.
Okay.
Right back.
All right. Is it going to have 4 legs?
Two.
Two.
It's my daughter, the designer of the book cover.
Oh, very nice. All right. Yeah. She's like 15 or something, I think. So I love that that was a selling point for me to write the foreword. He was like, my daughter did the book cover. She's a high school student. I was like, oh, that's so nice. But yeah, so, sort of lack of cause and effect here. So we really want to see that. Are we going to get to meet the artist? Do we want to meet the artist?
Yes. Come sit over here.
Okay.
Oh, can you close that door in case?
Yeah.
She's going to be camera shy. How old is she?
She's 14.
14, right? Okay. So is she a freshman in high school? Or?
She just started at Samo High.
Oh, okay.
And,
so you're, I didn't ask you where you are. So you're right here.
Yeah.
So, my son goes to Pali High.
Oh, so he might know this is Sunny.
Hi.
Hey,
Hi.
Sunny. Thanks for the book cover.
So she also drew this microscope looking into a book.
Nice.
She chose the colors, she chose the design, and you can see this little design right here. If you look closely, it is the microscope inside a book.
Yep.
And that is the design inside the book. If you look, you can see all the breaks.
Yes.
So I'm most proud of this accomplishment that I am even of writing the book.
No, I'm sure.
So,
what was your inspiration, Sonny? What was your inspiration?
Well, my biggest inspiration was probably my dad.
Oh, right answer. Good answer.
She's going to get an extra allowance this week.
Oh, goodness. I don't get it.
So I'll just be really brief. She is quite an accomplished artist herself. This is I thought, what a better opportunity for me to use her talent to kind of encourage her. I think she's probably the only freshman who's taking a design class who's already been, has
a published book.
Experience.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Funny enough, my teacher told me I was too advanced for that class.
There you go.
Thank you.
Okay. So thank you, Dylan.
Hey, Sonny, thank you. Let's give a round of applause for Sonny. Yay, Sonny. Woo!
Oh.
That's a proud papa.
Here's another log line.
Okay. Field of Grace, log line genre, romance, drama. Oh, it's got everything for you, Doc. A mesmerizing ingenue dreams of stardom on the London stage in the 1930s and finding her one true love. She falls into a complex love triangle with her bisexual Jewish agent and insufferable leading man, which ultimately leads to shattered dreams.
Well, I can see that movie, although I really can't. It's not what I would call a log line. It really hints at the central conflict. It's not very specific. and I think it's how should I put this? The setting is interesting. London stage in the 1930s is a world I'm kind of curious about, and I like the main characters. Although a mesmerizing ingenue is, it's not very specific. An ingenue is, I mean, are you saying she's a cute young girl? I mean, what is it? I like to describe the main character by their flaws, because in a word or two, you get to see how it's going to be difficult for them to achieve their desired outcome. And here, I'm not sure what the desired outcome is, although because it takes place in London in the 30s and he's Jewish, I'm not sure. What the specifics of the conflict are, and I would really like to kind of have that kind of framework. The opposition, is it if we knew what the conflict was, then we could say maybe the Jewish agent is her opposition character. Maybe she has a goal, maybe she doesn't. I'm not sure. I see. I'm sorry. The bisexual Jewish agent is different from the insufferable leading man.
Yes.
So
it's a love triangle.
It's a love triangle. Oh. Okay. That's interesting.
But Doc, it's interesting that you read it and you said that you can see the movie. So if that's the case, even if this doesn't fall into what, you, me, or Ramesh would, classically define as a log line.
Right.
Is it successful?
Well, the thing is that if it's getting into the hands of the right industry professional who is looking for a, period romance drama, then I think based on the setting and characters alone, I think there's enough for me to want to read the script. So in that respect, it's successful. But excuse me, if we're talking about, writing a traditional logline, can it be better? Absolutely. Does it work? Yeah. How do you feel about it?
Well, we've seen this before. Yes, Ramesh, this seems pretty familiar to me. And I think I probably always say the same thing, which is that it feels more like a novel to me. And maybe just because Jill hasn't been able to sort of crystallize it into something.
Right. The central conflict is definitely not clear, but
right.
Does it need to have a well-defined central conflict when you're talking about this? Maybe I'm just reading too much into it because of the setting is clear, and I can anticipate what a complex love triangle looks like and what a Jewish person in the 30s represents. So although it's not, I think it could be clear for sure.
Yeah.
And I think if it is more specific, if the conflict is more specific, like the ingenue is most definitely the main character in this description. I don't see her as flawed, and I don't know what she wants, and I don't know what negative consequences can befall her. I can only imagine. This is okay. If we were to look at this and we were just going to talk about premise, we're like, okay, it's a little bit more than a premise and not quite a logline.
Yeah, good point. It says that we can perhaps extrapolate based on what it says right here, which is that her goal is to find her one true love. But that is a little vague for me, and especially in a dramatic sense. And so while there are a lot of interesting elements here, and sure, like maybe I can see the movie, yeah, but I would probably pass on it just because, it doesn't feel crystallized enough for me.
It might work well on the back of the novel. Exactly.
Right. Yeah, exactly right.
Oh, I think
And-
Jill wanted to know if she could come on camera to explain the.
Well, the problem is you can't go into a meeting. You can't send out your logline in your script and then go there and explain. It has
Right.
the work has to sit on its own.
I agree 100%. That's the issue at hand is that if you send this to the likes of me, you're not there in person to explain it. So
Right.
you've got to figure out a way that this does all of that explaining for you.
And I need to be clear. It needs to be really specific with a meaningful goal, external consequences, and meaningful consequences. That means it's not just, they're looking for love. What does that mean? It's not like they're going to get their heart broken. We can't see it.
Right.
I need it to be
in a novel,
external.
in a novel, you can take, 800 pages inside the character's head, but we don't have that luxury. Now, I do see that she writes here that this is an adaptation. So I'm assuming that it's an adaptation of a novel. And I say this all the time because I read novels all the time. I get books that are submitted to me, saying, hey, is this worthy of an adaptation? And I probably say no most of the time because just because it's a novel doesn't mean that it should be a movie.
Right.
Part of a novel might make a great movie.
That's right. Yeah.
They did that with the John Irving novel, The Door in the Floor. I think that was that took like this bit of the
right.
Or 12 Days of the Condor. When they made it into a movie, they made it
6 days. 6 days. They made it into 3 days.
6 days.
But,
3 days.
Yeah,
And
I read a biopic actually where the biopic was sort of a birth to earth thing, but the book was a birth to earth, but the movie itself, the script itself, was just like a few hours in the character's life, and it worked really well.
Right.
Jill also says that it now ends with leads to shattered dreams on the hostile streets of Hitler's Berlin.
But the problem is that shattered dreams is vague, right?
Yes.
Internal.
Right, and it's internal. So again, we're looking for you to cinematize this, and yeah, I just made up that word.
Nice.
I've used it before. I don't think I really made it up, but yeah, Jill. So again, like there are a lot of really intriguing elements here, but it still feels like it's a novel, and you want to kind of clean that up a little bit. All right,
here's another one.
Let's get another one here. The Nano Sapiens by Keith. Keith was isn't Keith in our I'm having a senior moment. Isn't
I believe so?
You don't know either. You're just as bad as I am.
I know. It's
yes. Keith is one of our 5. He's in our class, in our TIP class of 2023, because he was one of our top 5 logline finalists in our contest last year. So let's see if this one is as good. The Nano Sapiens, a maverick scientist uses experimental nanotech enhancements to make 4 elite astronauts superhuman to survive a deep space mission. But when a hostile alien lands on Earth, they become our first line of defense. Think X-Men with the right stuff.
Okay. So my first question is, are they in deep space or are they on Earth? They were given the enhancements to make a trip, but before they could go, a hostile alien lands on Earth. I'm not sure.
That's the way I would interpret it. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
That doesn't mean I'm right, but that's the way I would interpret it. Yes.
I think there's a cleaner way to describe the context. I think that the central conflict is really super clear. They are the first line of defense against hostile aliens who land on Earth. So I know the setting and I know the conflict. I understand the lead main character, right? The maverick scientist. I'm not sure how. I would like to see how the character is flawed as opposed to being a maverick scientist. What's going to make it more difficult for them to achieve their desired outcome? Because there's so few words in here, I'm not saying he can't be a maverick. I'm saying that use that vital space to describe the character more. And I think that I think that this might help if you kind of first describe the premise, like four scientists with nanotech experiments must become the first line of defense when hostile aliens land on Earth. You know, it doesn't really tell me exactly what
I think in this case, I'm guessing the maverick scientist is the protagonist.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
But the problem is that the maverick scientist, according to this logline, isn't really involved in
the saving
central conflict, because we have the four superhumans. They are the ones that are the first line of defense. So what's the maverick scientist doing? And
I thought it was a Fantastic Four kind of thing where he was one of the scientists.
Well, I think that's what it is, but it doesn't say it, and
right.
And I would prefer that it be very, very specific and somehow make it clear as to what that maverick scientist is doing, how they are involved with this first line of defense. Even if they're the ones that are orchestrating it, or blah blah blah, whatever it is, because we kind of lose the maverick scientist in this log line.
Okay.
But I think it's really important to kind of push what you're saying here, because I always just sort of say adjective to describe the character. But you're saying specifically use an adjective that describes their flaw. And I agree with that 1,000,000%.
Yeah.
1,000,000%.
I actually think about the flaw as being the single word being a representation of an entire storyline, right?
Yeah, 100%. Right. Yeah. Because it's that internal psychological storyline in the story that is going to get worked out.
And also pick one adjective. Don't do 3, 4, 5, because we do see those log lines too. Where they try to throw everything in, and
I mean, listen, like maybe 2 if like the character is screaming for it, but one strong one, and again that really reveals who the character is inside, and that flaw, because remember, the flaw is conflict,
right?
And of course, we want to be able to sense that flaw is going to make the character's journey more difficult.
Yes.
So whatever that central conflict is that the character has to solve, that it's going to be made more difficult because of this flaw.
The external conflict, the internal battle. So I also want to point out that the secondary, compare and contrast, the right stuff is a story not about getting to space. It's about preparing to get to space, right? So I'm wondering if this story is about the scientists and the astronauts struggle to deal with the nanotech enhancements, or having to kind of find the right in, because that's a different story than the superhumans. It's then X-Men battling. They've already got those features, right? So is it about getting the features, the superhuman features, or is it about the battle with the aliens?
Right. according to this log line, I would assume that by the end of the first act, the aliens have landed. That's what I would assume based on this log line.
Right.
Now, if I read the screenplay and the aliens don't land until the end of the second act, then I would say that the log line was disingenuous.
Right, because what's the threat? If we don't understand what the specific threat of the aliens are, then we don't really understand why they need these specific nanotech enhancements.
All right, good point. Thank you, Doc. All right, what's next?
Yeah.
Riven Rock by Tina Love. Hey, Tina Love. I met Tina last year in New Mexico, and I'm going back. I'm going to be in New Mexico for the AFMX, Albuquerque Film and Music Experience, next weekend. All right, that's my plug. After a heartbreaking honeymoon in 1908, the first woman biology MT grad spends decades, it's a long movie, spends decades seeking to cure her husband's schizophrenia while battling his high-powered harvester family over his mental health care and guardianship. For tone, I use Comps, Downton Abbey meets Succession. This is obviously a series log line.
Okay, so I want to first talk about, I kind of mentioned it earlier, is that if you have if you talk about the series in terms of the premise, you have the premise line that describes all of the episodes. And then you have a log line that describes each episode. So in combination, you have, I'm not sure exactly what we're talking about here. Are we talking about the battle for, with the family and the guardianship? Is that a series level thing, or is that the pilot? So it might help first and foremost to sever the log line from the premise and just use two sentences. You'll probably use less words than trying to describe everything in one. But what I'm curious about is, I kind of get this for, I'm not really sure what the series looks like yet. And I'm not sure what part of this applies to the episode that we're talking about. Does it make sense?
Yes.
Isn't it better in cases like this, to do a log line for the pilot and a log line for the series, two separate log lines?
I'm just saying that to differentiate the two, the premise, what I call the premise line, is what pretty much the universe calls the log line for the series. But the log line for the series is a lot longer to say, and it really, if we're talking about a log line being specifics of conflict, I want to say that the premise line is the promise of conflict. It's the narrative glue between each episode. It describes each episode. The premise line will describe all episodes, generally speaking. So in order to differentiate the two, I want to call one the premise line and one the log line.
All right.
Does it make sense, Ramesh?
Yeah.
Okay.
Here's one, Ramesh. I'm going to just throw this one up by Kevin. Benny versus the World. A widowed retirement-age teacher discovers his high school-age autistic son has accidentally killed a student. Fate's now sealed. The teacher and son flee the school, disappearing on a cross-country jaunt, causing a nationwide manhunt, ending in a standoff at the Grand Canyon.
Tragic. I think I need to understand why a teacher with a high school age autistic son would go on the run. It seems to me that an autistic child would not understand the consequences of his actions, and therefore there would be no reason to flee. So I think that this is something where it seems to me that justice is mal-served, I guess, and this is why they're on the run, but that's not clear. And I think that's the triggering event, more so than the son accidentally killing another student. So I think I'd like to understand how the story, resolves. Like in the standoff at the Grand Canyon, it's not just two people pointing guns at each other, right? And one survives and one doesn't. There's a thematic resolution as opposed to a external resolution. So I'm not clear what the how that's resolved.
I also think
they're on the run the whole time.
Yeah, right. They're on the run, so
Sure.
it's like
But why?
yeah. I mean, it's great if there is a finish line, right? That the characters are specifically trying to solve their problem while they're on the run. Case in point, The Fugitive, right? Where Harrison Ford is on the run from Tommy Lee Jones, but he struggles to prove his innocence by finding the actual murderer of his wife. So, and here, of course, we just kind of spoke about the whole Act 1 thing. This to me sounds like it's Act 3,
right,
where we get causing a nationwide manhunt, ending in a standoff at the Grand Canyon. To me, that's third act stuff. That's not happening, and so we don't need any of that.
Yeah. Listen, what is their need exactly?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, Doc. I think this is maybe because we're both dads, but it's there's the movie with Liam Neeson and Meryl Streep and Leonardo DiCaprio where he has killed somebody, and maybe it's based on a play. I'm not sure. And it's like, what do parents do in that kind of situation? And it's, it's pretty scary. So I like this central
before and after. That was it.
Before and after. Thank you. I like the central conflict. I like the idea that they have to take it on the lam, but what are they doing on lam specifically? How are they going to try to solve their problem?
Right. But they have to define before you can solve it. You have to define it.
Exactly right. And it's interesting that Doc sort of brings up this element, because I said earlier that, that there are some blanks in a story that we need to fill in the log line, and others that we don't. And sometimes these blanks are very subjective, meaning that where Doc might want a blank filled in, maybe I feel like, I don't really need that blank filled in. But because this is such a subjective business that, so if you send a log line to me and not to Doc, then maybe you're okay. But if you send it to Doc and not to me, then maybe you're not okay.
Right. So, but if you're making the movie and I'm not, then he wants to get the right log line to the right person.
Absolutely. But still, you never really know who the right person is in this business, right? Which is why you really, truly always want to lead with your best foot forward. And so Doc is really picking out a logic issue here, which I would agree with now, which is, ultimately why, why on the lam if an autistic boy accidentally killed a student. Now I would be willing to ride with that, meaning if I find it intriguing enough, I'm willing to sort of roll the dice and take my chance that the screenplay will fill in that blank and make it credible. But if it's not credible, or it doesn't fill in the blank, then the whole thing could just fall apart. I just might be like, I don't buy this at all.
Right.
I don't believe that they're on the lam. I don't believe that they have to take it on the lam. And then they're on the lam for 90 pages. And,
right.
Every page I'm like, well, why? Why are they on the lam?
So my thing is that if you define the need in the beginning, then the resolution solves the need, right? So if they're at the, it's not just that it's a standoff at the Grand Canyon. It's how the logic of the beginning is resolved in the ending.
All right, Kevin Patrick Goulet. I wonder if he's any relation to Robert Goulet.
Yeah.
By the way, you know something? Last week I sang the song from, was it Camelot? No, it's from, I don't know what it's from. And You'll Never Walk Alone from Carousel.
Oh.
And it got like bleeped out. Can you believe it? It got
Really?
like bleeped out. Yeah, because I mean, like I did some like a horrible satirical rendition for like a bar or two. And I get all these like, you know, you don't have the rights. And, you know, we're going to silence that in some regions around the world. I'm like, that is a blessing if people don't have to hear me sing. Okay, Henry, Omaba, supernatural thriller. Omaba, I love that. Omaba, sounds cool. In a pandemic-ridden world, a young pharmacist armed with supernatural powers from an ancestral deity takes on a ruthless pharmaceutical giant to safeguard a life-saving cure.
Damn. Yeah.
And listen, Henry has a picture with a little boy, so you better be nice to him. Or maybe
no,
there's two little boys.
I actually, no, I'm looking for, I'm going through my ticking of, you know, all the boxes. I'm like, whoa, that's pretty darn good. Again, the only thing that I would say is what makes this, what flaw does this pharmacist have? That, I mean, all he has is supernatural powers that make his desired outcome easier. What makes it harder?
Right.
And I'm sure there's something that he has to learn how to he has to learn how, like in Spider-Man, the origin story, he discovers that he has these powers and he has to learn how to use them, adapt. And I'm wondering if that is part of the story here, or because it says armed with, which means he already has that from the beginning. So what is the struggle? So, I mean, if he's got supernatural powers, I mean, what makes the pharmaceutical giant so powerful? And that's really the only issue that I'm having. We've lived this world together. So, you know, the setting is fine. I see the oppositional force. Perhaps you can personify the pharmaceutical giant. Maybe not necessary, because I mean, we're talking about an oppositional force that's that can very easily be represented in the script by a person. But so I'm trying to again understand why the villain, the pharmaceutical giant villain, wants to. I mean,
yeah, you're right. There's a little bit of a logic issue, right? Which is that if in the pandemic, if it like kills everybody, then the pharmaceutical giant is out of business, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So
right.
So wouldn't he want to sell his? You know, wouldn't
Right.
he want to have a life-saving cure so he could make $1 gazillion?
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So that
Yeah,
might
and
need
then
to be
the way it's
explained.
worded, it's kind of it's not clear that the pharmaceutical giant wants to safeguard the life-saving cure. That's why I paused for a second. It's like, no, it's the pharmacist.
Right.
So how can you make your opposition and your main character more clear? The opposition clear, the conflict clear.
All right. Good point, Doc. Thank you. Ramesh, maybe one or two more?
Yeah. I know she's been struggling with this, so I thought I'd put it up.
All right. Tasha gets a lot of attention at the Inside Pitch. You must love it here. We love you, Tasha. Okay. To reap is to sow. A small town detective and its residents fall into a deep state of death and fear when a vengeful former resident returns.
100% premise. And I think that the problem is that how do you fall into a deep state of death? Isn't it like a on or off switch? Either you're dead or you're not. I'm not sure. In this world, it may not be, of course. So I guess what I'm looking for is I don't see a conflict. I see a lot of negative things happening, but I don't see that related to the detective. And I'm not sure why the vengeful former resident is, they show up and what happens. I just don't see, I'm not seeing any conflict. I'm seeing results from it, but I'm not making any connection.
Yeah, I think there was a better version of this on the group page, to be honest,
Right.
because there was a little bit more information, which I think she needs. She needs that.
I think the
brief.
the person seeking vengeance is coming back because she was harmed many years ago.
That's right.
Decades
that's what
ago
it was.
by the town, and
that's right.
Now she's coming back to kick some ass.
That's right. Yeah, it was like a little bit of I know what you did last summer.
Right.
Kind of thing.
So is the small town detective the main character, or is
I think the protagonist might be the vengeful former resident.
Okay, that makes a huge difference.
Yeah, and then of course, if Ramesh is correct, then the logline needs to be rewritten from that point of view.
Yeah,
but there really isn't even a point of view here per se.
Right.
Yeah. So
and I write. I've been writing articles for Creative Screenwriting magazine, and I just published an article this last week regarding who the main character is and who the opposition is. When you identify the central conflict, that is essentially between main character and an oppositional force. But who are they? And in this case, it may very well be that the villain is not a villain, right? The former resident may very well be what we call an anti-protagonist, and we can get into that. It's a whole nother story. But anytime the character does things that are antithetical to the morals and values of the audience, they can still be a protagonist or a hero, serving the same purpose and interacting with the other elements. But in order to set audience expectations, it might be better to say, stick with me. This guy's not going to, hew to our morals or ethics, but stick with me anyway, right? So the
Dirty Harry is one kind of.
I'm sorry?
Dirty Harry tends to be that way.
That is the very prime example I use in the book for an anti-hero, because he's seeking justice. He's not seeking. He's not a protagonist. He's just seeking justice when justice.
He's not a
is
hero.
failed.
Yeah, he's the anti-hero.
So
we can look at Scarface, or even any of the Godfather movies, right? But there are still redeemable qualities to them, right? Like if you look at Tony Montana, he only kills bad guys, right? Until he makes kind of a fatal decision late in the second act, and then sort of everything
with regard to his sister, that everything then the tide turns. Then at that point, his fate is sealed from the audience's point of view. Exactly.
Right.
And we're happy to see him go down.
Right. Because, remember, he's in a car where he has to blow up an ambassador, right? But the ambassador's with his two kids, and he refuses to do that. He's like, I'm not killing anybody's kids. So, we see that, this is a guy, he will kill anybody who's bad, but isn't killing, even though, it's like if you look at the movie, just kind of, from, you use a term, well, what's, like when you look at the movie from, like the sky or something, right? Don't you use that?
10,000 feet.
10,000 feet, right. You know, it just seems like, you know, he's kind of like a bad guy. But when you really sort of put it under the microscope, you see, oh, yeah, I see. You know, he's like, he's not killing anybody who's good. Everybody he kills.
Right. But that's a
is a
strange
bad guy.
thing, because do you remember the movie, the TV movie, Fail Safe?
Fail safe. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So
Yeah.
in that movie, spoiler alert, you know, we accidentally blow up Moscow. In order to prevent a war, we show them that it really truly was an accident by doing something truly horrific and personal to ourselves.
Right.
And so we kill millions of people here, right? And we say that's the right thing to do, at least in the morals and ethics of the story. But this guy won't kill two people because they're good, because they're kids.
Right.
And we say,
right. Exactly.
Okay,
Yeah.
Here's one more.
Okay. Thank you, Ramesh.
Yeah.
Bad Habits by Tanya. When two young novice nuns stray from the convent to rescue a wayward teen runaway, they find themselves in some pretty unorthodox situations to keep her from the grasp of a shyster lawyer who's after a wallet she's stolen that contains a key to a locker in a bus station that holds his ill-gotten fortune.
To me,
there's a lot happening there.
That feels like a synopsis.
There's just a lot of words.
Yeah. Right. So for me, the real central conflict is the novice nuns steal. Wait a second, is that right? The novice nuns steal.
They rescue.
No, forget the rescuing. That's the secondary.
No, it's the
little
teen.
girl.
It's the
teen
who stole the wallet.
Oh, okay. All right. Shoo. There you go. You see my problem?
No, this is like this. This is what happens when there's a lot of words, right?
Yeah.
There is definitely a way to winnow this down.
Sure, and that's to focus on the main character. Who is the main character? Is it the novice nuns, or is it the runaway? And I would argue that because the stolen wallet is the resolution revolves around that, not whether the nuns rescue the teen. That the focus of the story should be on the runaway teen and the shyster lawyer. And yeah, I think that there's just too much going on to focus on what the central conflict is. Now, that's not to say that the nuns aren't important. You might say something like, when a novice runaway teen steals the wallet of a shyster lawyer, she enlists the help of two young novice nuns, or hides away in a convent, right, or whatever the case may be. Being clear with the main character and the opposition, and then the central conflict will become more clear.
Yeah, and there's also a little bit of a logic issue here, which is, why don't they just take the girl to the police station? Why don't they just throw the wallet on the ground? Who cares about the wallet, right? Who cares? Like, give the lawyer his wallet. Who cares about the ill-gotten
or give him the
fortune?
key is really what he wants, right?
Yeah, exactly. So
why must she?
Right, exactly. And the idea of having to try to keep her from the grasp of the lawyer, it's a little vague, because again, it just doesn't feel like it's all that hard. You could just take her to a police station and the movie's over.
Problem over. Yeah.
Right. So so I think that we need a little bit more
defining the need more. Yeah.
Right.
For
Yes.
sure.
All right. Any other questions, Ramesh, or loglines? All right, here we go. Michael, thank you, Michael. Okay. Invited to the cookout. It's a comedy. After receiving an invitation to the family cookout from his black girlfriend, a white guy must first prove his worthiness by completing a series of outlandish challenges from her 3 skeptical brothers, including one that puts all of their lives in their crosshairs of a corrupt oligarch.
Okay, so first of all, the real conflict doesn't feel to me that it is the oligarch. It feels to me that it's the skeptical brothers wanting the white guy to prove he's worthy, and the oligarch is just an escalation from that. So if I'm wrong, then so be it. Then but my feeling is that we don't need to understand that that it's the family cookout first. I think it's a white guy must prove his worthiness to, maybe it does need to be first. I don't know. I'd have to write this out and iterate and kind of feel, but I feel like there's a briefer, more figurative way to express the conflict or the context. It feels like there's a lot, but I think that the conflict is really super clear. To prove his worthiness, to be in that space, he is. He's got a lot of what should we say? The negative consequences are he's going to be rejected by his girlfriend's family, and that it must be important to him. Otherwise, we wouldn't have a story. So I think that the series of outlandish challenges, is that specific enough? It might be for a comedy, because I don't necessarily want to. I want to know that they're outlandish and they're escalating, but I don't necessarily need it to be the life and death with the oligarch. That can be a pleasant surprise, I think.
Yeah, because I wonder if that is even introduced in the first act. That sounds like something that would be introduced a little bit later in the script.
It's the Sixth Sense.
Yeah, right, exactly. So,
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Michael.
Let's do a couple more.
Okay, Roy, Black Dragon. When a white passing half Japanese woman hides in Seattle as her Japanese American lover is sent to the World War II internment camps, they covertly work with the resistance to expose the injustices, to shut the camps down and reunite.
Wow. Okay. I think you could benefit right away from saying this is 1943 or whatever it might be, just to give us not let us figure it out, which is kind of obvious, but I think it just 1943 Seattle,
it doesn't hurt, right?
Yeah, it doesn't hurt.
Yeah.
I think this problem is that the conflict is such that I'm not sure that 2 people from Seattle can solve the problem of shutting down the internment camps. If this is based on a true story, then I'll believe it because it happened, right? But if we're just talking about like nonfiction, if we're talking about fiction, then the goal needs to be in proportion to the ability of the main character to achieve it. So can a white passing half Japanese woman in Seattle convince the US government to shut down internment camps and release her Japanese American lover?
That sounds good. It's an underdog story, right? It's Norma Ray. It
would be good if it was based on a real story.
Well, is it? Do we know?
I have no idea.
Okay.
But if it was, I would say that in the log line.
Yeah.
Sure. Absolutely.
Right. in this particular instance where there's only a log line. Yes.
Right.
In the real world, a log line doesn't just float out there like it does here. It's usually in a letter where you have the ability to say, this is based on a true story that my grandmother experienced, or, blah, 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 like that kind of thing.
Right. So the thing is that her need is to reunite with her lover, and it, in the course of the story and the telling of in the logline, I'm just not sure how that's going to happen, how that could happen unless the war ends, and she has no agency in that, in the ending, as I see it.
Right.
So
so the idea of they covertly work with the resistance to expose the injustices, you don't like that?
They are secondary characters in the resistance, or I kind of do, but what does that mean? Covertly work, right?
Yeah, it's definitely a little vague, right?
Yeah. So
he wrote. I think I'm not if there's a
historical fiction
on what it took to convince the ACLU to get into the court case.
So in this case, it's fiction, but so I would say, you've got too many allies. You've got the resistance, you've got the ACLU, and you've got.
But the ACLU isn't in the log line, though.
Right. But it seems like it would be important, because it's really not about shutting down the case, shutting down the camps. It's about getting the ACLU to take on the case, because that is something that's achievable within the context of the narrative conflict that we see. Right.
That's a good point. Yes, correct. Yeah. So, yeah. And it's also very specific. Now, whether or not that's in Roy's story, I don't know, right?
Right.
That may not be in Roy's story. The ACLU may not make an appearance. Maybe this isn't about that.
Isn't that what he says in his
he wrote here, the government was using propaganda and lying about the conditions. They are trying to get the truth about what was actually happening. But he also says that the ACLU is a good point. So, so I agree with you. I think that, that is something that is much more sort of filmable and struggling to get the ACLU to take the case.
Right. And then the really cool thing is, it really is a clear-cut win when the ACLU says, yes, we will take the case.
We're going to take it, right? He says it is. I'm assuming that that's what his script is about. If that's what it's about, then I would put that in the log line.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that would be really clear, really cool.
Right. Exactly. I agree with you completely. All right, good.
Okay, two more and then we're done here.
Okay. We're working Doc over.
I know.
That's cool. I love it. You guys are great.
You're having your cherry pop today. Pardon that rather crude expression, but you are, and you're doing great. All right, Curb Appeal, a musical comedy. I wonder if they heard me sing last week. A would-be jihadi finds himself alone and abandoned in New York City by his extremist handlers after he has garnered viral attention for a small act of kindness. Consumed by the drug of fame, the jihadi abandons his mission and his handlers cannot abide.
That's funny.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely amusing. I mean, I think the logline is very vague, but yeah.
So I would start with a would-be jihadi performs a small act of kindness, but when it goes viral, he must, and then do what, right?
Sounds like it wants to be like a little bit like the South Park musical. It wants to be a little. I'm sorry, not not the South Park musical, the Book of Mormon, although really both, I guess. But yeah, it really feels like it wants to be Book of Mormon, which, by the way, was written by the South Park people, which was why I.
But they've abandoned him, so I don't understand why they care if they've abandoned him. Why they care about?
Right. I mean, he should probably abandon them, right? And then they want to set things straight,
Right.
Then they declare, like a fatwa on him, or something like that, and blah blah blah. But Doc has really hit upon. So what is the character doing? What must he do?
Yeah. So in my vernacular, my taxonomy, this is a trailblazer character. He's a jihadist consumed by the drug of fame, who, when performing an act of kindness, must convince his handlers to that there is another way, essentially, right? We don't have to. The war on the West can be conducted essentially by kindness as opposed to by violence. And that actually is a kind of a heartfelt comedy that I'd like to see. It's like it broadens my horizons of why a character would first become a jihadi, and secondly, what happens if they have second thoughts, whether those second thoughts are because of consumerism and the drug of fame and the feelings that he gets from being recognized as a good person as opposed to a bad person. Those are all kind of fun things to think about that the story might explore.
I find the title to be a little bit befuddling. I'm not exactly sure. Yeah,
I'm not sure what it means. But.
Yeah, it could probably find a much more clever, funnier title. But
blowing up.
Yeah.
It means two things. You like to blow up, to go viral, to blow up, to be.
There you go. Look at that. I like that. Very good.
Let's do the last one here.
Okay. The looter left to perish in his home during a raging wildfire. An old man's survival depends solely on the efforts of a looter out to pillage his estate. But what seems to be a chance meeting is really a sinister plan for money and murder.
Well, I was all in until it turned out to be a villain as opposed to a buddy flick about these two characters that are grossly mismatched, different perspectives, and in a unique setting. So unless he's the looter, if the let me put it this way: if it were the setting, the setup was that the villain was planning a money and murder, some let's just say kidnapping or something like that, and then while it happened, then the fires consumed them, and they had to learn to work together to survive. That'd be an interesting story for me. But what it feels like is it's just a random thing. It's like the looter was out to pillage the estate, he ran across this old man. But if that's the case, does that happen before the fire or after the fire? Do they have to? I'm just not sure. I need a little bit more clarity on the setting and the context.
Yeah, I think your hesitation here is right on, and it reminds me a little bit of a movie that I produced called The Collector, which you had a thief break into a house to steal something out of a safe, and he finds himself in the middle of a home invasion by a character far worse than he, and now he has to save the family without getting himself killed, and he actually does a very bad job. of saving.
So everybody
the family.
dies?
Well, not everybody, but but almost. And but so I think that there's definitely some merit to this, but I would also say that like Doc, but what seems to be a chance meeting is really a sinister plan for money and murder. It's vague. I would just find a way to make that more clear. And again, who are we rooting for here? Or at the very least, who has the dilemma?
Right. They both have a dilemma, which is the forest fire.
Right. But
the wildfire, I should say.
But the looter is there to really do something else, sort of like the character in my film. And
sure.
So it's a little bit it's vague. I definitely think that the kind of initial start of this is interesting. And I think that's the way Doc felt also. But then it just sort of gets lost in itself. So
I think that a lot of writers feel like, well, let me put it in two ways. Some writers feel that emotions are more important, and some feel that plot is more important. And it's clear that this person focuses more on plot than emotion.
Right. Of course, I think that you should try to include both. That
Both
should be equally as important, right?
The Bear, the David Mamet, I think.
Yeah.
That is, I think, a great thing where two people are stuck and they both have the same dilemma and they have a different way of approaching the problem, different perspectives, and it's and there's nothing they can do about it. That's the force of nature is a bitch.
Right. The idea of a raging wildfire is the entire story set in the house, and are we going to believe that that the entire movie can be set in a burning house?
We should also.
I'm not saying that we can't, but
we should also note that the title is The Looter, which indicates that the main character is the looter, not the person that they start off the logline with, which is the old man.
That's right. Yeah, good point. So again, really taking into account point of view here and really delivering the logline from the point of view of your main character. Mr. Ramesh, you have anything to add? Oh, he does, as a matter of fact. He has one more. Because, by the way, I don't know if you know this, Doc, but Ramesh, he loves these marathons. He loves
I'm trying to give the members
I know.
their
This is,
view,
get their money's
Ramesh
worth,
is
for
the sweetest guy in the world, and he wants to make sure that Ramesh will stay here for 50 hours.
And I grew this beard specifically. No, I'm just kidding. It has nothing to do with
Okay. Lysistrata's cell. A young American widow trapped in Afghanistan weaves together 6 disparate women and girls to form a terrorist cell to take out the oppressive Taliban.
Premise.
I mean, interesting title, right? Because, Lysistrata has to do with sex.
And who is Liz Estrada anyway?
I mean, it just could be a like a symbolic title, maybe.
Sure.
Yeah.
Go
ahead, Doc.
Yeah, I think that it's if you were to tell me that this were a TV series, I would say, yeah, I get that. And then every episode's going to be about, something. But what is it going to be about? They're obviously not going to take out the Taliban. Trillions of dollars and the complete U.S. Army couldn't do that. So how are six young, inexperienced Afghan girls women and girls going to do that?
Yeah.
Again, we're talking about the idea that the goal should be first and foremost achievable. So obviously they can't take out the Taliban. So what is it? What is their true goal? Their ambition might be something more, but the narrative conflict can be resolved in something much, much more specific, like we talked about with getting the ACLU to take on the case in the previous logline here, what is it the girls have to do specifically that will have the effect of, like, okay, so there are, if you go to like a war movie, there's a category of war movies called World War II movies, right? And not all of them start at the beginning and end at the end, right? A lot of them are just like the Bridge at Remagen, which is all about the necessity to take out the specific bridge. And so the consequences, the goal is clear, the consequences are clear, not from my description, but in the movie, the consequences are clear, and the audience is completely engaged with this one little conflict within this grand conflict of World War II. Here we have the grand conflict of the oppressive Taliban, and I don't know what the specific.
Yes. I think it would be better. I mean, I get the Lysistrata cell. It's the play on Aristophanes' play, which also involved women denying sex. But I think in this case, it's if they were going to take out something that was just targeting a village so that it was saving that village from.
Right.
Then it's just
one of our members,
like the
Ramesh, uses Valkyrie, right? One of our members says Valkyrie, right? Where, it's where they're on a very, very specific mission to kill.
I mean,
Hitler.
all those World War II movies, Where Eagles Dare, Bridge at Remagen, Guns of Navarone, they were all take out the guns of Navarone.
Ryan.
What? Right.
Saving Private Ryan.
Right. They were all had a specific goal in the broader scheme of things.
Right. Exactly. Right.
So
and again, the more specific you can be, the more we're able to visualize the story. Is this, pre-U.S. invasion? Is this, inside the green zone? 10 years into the invasion or 20 years into the invasion? It makes a difference. The specifics.
Yeah, it does. Log lines are about specificity. You've got to spell it out. You've got to give us the details so we can see the movie.
Right.
Anything else, Ramesh?
Nope. I think I'm sure we missed some log lines, but
all right. Well, we're sorry if we did, but we can't. I told Doc like 90 minutes, and it's already been like 2.5 hours.
Right.
Really?
Right. And I haven't had breakfast. I haven't had.
You haven't had breakfast yet? Listen.
No.
You need to make a smoothie, like I just.
I had coffee, but
okay. All right. So, Doc, why don't you hold up your book one more time for us? Here it is. What's the full title?
Mastering the Logline.
How to Excite
Hollywood with a single sentence, with a foreword by one Christopher Lockhart.
Yours truly. Thank you for allowing me to write it. I appreciate it.
Oh my gosh. And I can't tell you, let me just add that there can be no better opening 3 pages to my book that sets the context for my entire book than the 3 pages that you wrote. I am so very thankful for
Well, you're very kind. And I made sure they actually read the book. So, and again, Doc breaks down story in a very specific way that will help you understand the elements that you need to put into your logline. You'll actually say, as you're breaking down the elements of your own story, I'm missing this.
Yeah.
I don't have this.
Yeah.
And then,
Exactly.
So it's all there for you. You can get the book on Amazon right now. And also, you said you have a website.
I do. MasteringTheLogline.com.
There you go. All right. Anything else from anybody?
No, apparently I'm missing a really good game in the Rugby World Cup.
You love rugby. I know you love it.
I do.
Remember when I was coming back from South Africa? Remember there was that guy in the airport?
Oh yeah, Chris Gale. You walked.
I took a picture of him for a message.
He's a cricket player.
I didn't know who he was. Oh,
West Indian cricket player. And then you drove by Brian Lara's house.
Yes,
when
we
you
did.
went? Yes.
I know, and I don't know who any of those people are, and I don't really even know the difference between cricket and rugby, to be honest. One uses a bat. I know.
I have
one
much to
uses like a
teach
bat.
you.
Although it's not a bat. I don't think they call it a bat.
In
Do they
cricket,
call
yeah,
it a
it's
bat? They do.
Yeah.
Look at that. I'm an expert on sports. All right, Doc, thank you so much for your time today.
And thank you guys.
Congratulations on the book.
Thank you.
Everybody should get the book. Again, you know something? Log lines are a necessary evil, and there's no reason to treat them like the opposition. They truly are your friend in so many ways, because they help you understand your story, but they also help you present your story to other people in a single sentence that can entice Hollywood, as James's title says. I might have mangled it a little bit, but thank you, everybody. Thank you, our tip members, and thank you for the 5 or 6 of you that actually followed on Facebook. I mean, on YouTube today. It worked, Ramesh. It worked.
Good. Yeah.
I think so. Look at this. All right. So on that note, thank you, everybody, and get the book and keep your eyes out on the page, because we will be. It was requested that we will be scheduling another sort of lag line. Is right. That is
Logline.
Boy, what a Freudian slip. Another logline event, probably like in November or something. So, all right. On that note, thank you again, Doc. Good luck with the book.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Ramesh.
Thank you very much.
And thank you, everybody that helped, that supported us today.